Okay, give me a hand. Give me a hand. Let me hold this while I say. This video might not apply to you. I am well aware that I am only talking to some of you. If I spend the next 10 minutes talking about all the different ways this video might not apply to your specific life, we simply will never get round to the actual point of the video. So I release you from the pressure, from the stress, from the strain, from the labour of having to explain that to me in the comments. Please trust me when I say I know, but I am making this with the slim chance that it might reach the people that it does actually apply to. And past me would have been somebody who would think, I don't know if that applies to me, but I might watch the video anyway because I'm bored, and then watch the video and be like, holy shit, that might apply to me. Either way, thank you for giving me some of your time. Let us begin. So my name is Lena. I was born in Coventry, raised in Coventry, which is a town in the middle of England. It doesn't have the best reputation, but it's also not like the roughest city ever. And when I was growing up here, in this very room, actually, I'm currently dog sitting for my parents, so I'm staying in my old bedroom. I vow to sweet baby Jesus that I would never return. That the Midlands was not for me. I would be Dick Whittington. I would be going to seek my fortune in London. Was the seeking done? Yes. Was the fortune found? Not quite. I did pretty well in my jobs in London. I don't say this to boast, but I did a lot of very high pressured jobs. I won some awards for how good I was at those jobs. But after 9 years of paying atrocious rents and feeling my way into the freelance field and a little bit of this, a little bit of the online space, I realised that there might be a chance to leave. And as the pandemic wore on and I realised how much I was getting rinsed and how dystopian the area that I lived in was when it came to resources for outside space versus amount of people living there, me and Craig decided to try out something else, and we left London. I have now been 5 years London sober, 5 years off the magic juice, and I thought I'd take a moment to reflect on that decision and why I think it's worthwhile for you to consider doing it, even if that was not the plan. Because I think the decision I made to move to London in 2013 is a very different decision to the decision that people are making now. I was recently contacted by somebody who was like, oh, I've got a offer of a paid internship in the industry that you used to work in, and it's for this amount. And the amount that they gave was like way more than I was paid. And I wasn't even paid to do an internship. I had to like save up and do it for free and take time off my shop job to do it. And I was like, paid internship at this price, do it. And then I googled the inflation difference between what they were being paid and the cost of living and what I had been paid when I first moved to London, which was a struggle even then. And I was like, actually I wouldn't do that. I think we underestimate the huge impact the cost of living crisis and inflation has made on what a normal salary is or what a normal salary can buy you. And I think that we have collectively been left in the dark about how freewheeling our idea of what money is and how much things should cost has changed or should have changed. So I wanted to talk to you about 4 dichotomies that I see when I have debated with myself when it came to like leaving London, whether we'd made the right decision, whether we should move back, and where the propaganda is and where the truth is. It's very much like that propaganda I'm not falling for, and the propaganda that I had invented in my own head about my identity and living in a capital city either was never true to begin with, or in the last 5 years I think has completely ceased to be true. So the first one is optimism versus delusion. I consider myself a massive optimist. Always a trier, somebody who will try and make things work whatever happens, especially if I'm getting to live in the bright lights in the big city and get all the advantages of living there. But as I approached my 30s and I tried to do stuff like get out of my overdraft, go on holiday, accrue some savings, get regular haircuts, those things increasingly seemed out of my reach. And the higher the rent got and the lower quality the housing got, and how I started reading about all of the health risks of living somewhere mouldy, my idealism started to crack, along with the observation that the older I got, the more I got to know my older colleagues, and most of the women who were above me in the UK publishing industry it transpired after a while, I realized that they were 2-income households and the other person's income was much higher than our industry, like very much higher than our industry. I think people are worried about talking about that, and obviously there's no public stats on that because that would be very intrusive, but like I think that it's something that there's a lot of like guilt and shame around talking about, and it's only when you really get to know people that you realize it's because it's kind of implying that these, like, usually men are supplementing or subsidizing a woman's career. It's not, I don't really think we should see it through that lens. We should see it through the lens of companies are failing to pay their workers properly, and the only people that can survive are people who are already from money, or people who have, and this is a very Austin way of saying it, married well. People who have partners in, I want to say profitable industries or lucrative industries, but the industry that I was in is a profitable industry. It's incredibly lucrative. The amount of profits that my division was making were amazing. Good for the shareholders. This was a profitable industry that wasn't sharing its profits in the same way that maybe some other industries are. Now, I talk on this channel a lot about positive panic, and I use that term in relation a lot to the climate crisis, but I think it also can come down to the way we see the economy and how it applies to our lives. And I think there is not enough panic. I want us to approach it in a positive way, but there's not enough panic and reality about what you will lose by trying to make a living in a capital city right now. With the arrogant, deceptive advantage of hindsight, and like me having already made that decision and feeling good about it, it baffles me that are people that have a chance at financial security in this world, in this economy, in this country, and aren't taking it simply because leaving isn't their dream scenario or their perfect place. I think we're encouraged to see ourselves as completely financially doomed as young professionals because going back on not using our degrees or stopping working in the industry we've been working towards being good at for the past like decade. We've been encouraged to see that as like impossible to walk away from, and therefore we are financially doomed because there's no way we could do anything else. And the reality is we totally can. I really tried to resist the narrative that it's like, unlucky me, I had to leave London because I'm not from wealth, or I don't have like a wealthy partner, or I don't have this, or I don't have that. It's not that, and I didn't have to leave. I think a lot of us are encouraged to feel unlucky when we are not actually unlucky in the grand scale of things. I realised that I was an incredibly lucky person that had a lot of advantages and opportunities and resources, but I was living in a city that made me feel unlucky because in that city it is so rare to be lucky, to have enough money to save and live and buy a house, that it wasn't that I was unlucky or hard done by, although I do think that most people in Britain are hard done by the government and they should sort that out. But just in this context, I wasn't particularly hard done by compared to most people in my country, but that my luck was in the wrong currency. The luck that I had was not London luck, but that doesn't make it not luck and something that I could use to go back to the place that I was born, in this case the Midlands, and create a safer space for me to live. That is the unlucky delusion that I think a lot of people have been put in when they get to London and they feel like they're just unlucky, but they'll get lucky one day. So the slot machines of like, I'll get that job, I'll get that promotion, my industry will start trying to pay people fairly. I think that is when optimism crosses over into delusion, and I felt like I had to do something about that. The second dichotomy is necessity versus preference. I'm going to remind you, this isn't going to apply to everybody. This is my experience. It might not work this way for you, but for me, I used to feel like London was the only place that I really felt at home. It's the first place that I wasn't the only person reading on public transport. It's the first place that I didn't get stared at if I wore a tutu while walking around, which is something I did as a teenager in Coventry, and it got mixed reviews. But then I started unpacking that and I was like, do I have the right to feel at home in the rest of the country too? Yeah, I think I do. I think everybody does. But like, England is my country, for better or for worse, sometimes for worse, but England is my country and I should be able to feel at home in the rest of it. Especially with all of the privileges that I have, it is insane to me that I think that the only place that I can feel at home is London, and how much of my ego is involved with that. How much of that is like, well, I'm an artist, so I only feel at home with other artists, so I have a bohemian soul. You know what I mean? Like, how much of that is about how I feel about myself, and how I won't feel like that about myself if I go somewhere that I don't perceive to be as arty or as progressive. The second mindset shift is progress versus stagnation. The word progressive came up a lot for me when I was trying to reflect on this, and I think there's like this perceived idea of capital cities as being progressive spaces, mini states within a less progressive country. If you aren't from the UK, I'd love to hear if that is the same in your country, but my impression is that that is a quite common conception / misconception / bit of propaganda about capital cities, because of course capital cities have to keep up, and they have like whole marketing departments keeping up this idea that they are idealized places to visit and be a tourist in and live and go. People literally have jobs making sure that that is the case, and I think that we're very switched on when it comes to marketing, when it comes to like skincare or like weight loss tablets, but we're not thinking as much about the fact that like there is marketing that goes into making you feel like capital cities are the only place that you can get what you need. And you're right, like in some ways there is lots of progress happening in London. There is lots of like thinking hubs and like innovation and exciting stuff happening because there is money being poured into it, and that makes sense. That makes complete sense. However, when I think about what would progress our country, I think that it is not a very progressive structure to keep all of the stuff in one city. And how progressive can a city be when it's trying to make itself the hub of somewhere? I'm not sure if healthy countries have a hub. If I'm being really out there, let's not push you today, but that's what I believe. I don't believe that there should be one place where everything happens. It's so, in the same way that we say no kings, maybe no capitals. But that might be a conversation for another day. We simply don't have time. My catchphrase. London is where we measure economic value, but it's not necessarily where the economic value is being made. And my other question is, if I do want things to progress, things to get better, and I say that I only feel at home in London because of the way that I'm thinking in my psyche about how I feel about myself and how I'm like received by other people, then do I think that moving and staying stubbornly, even to the detriment of my finances and my health and my safety, somewhere where what I perceive to be people like me live, the go-getters, is that really that forward thinking to be like, oh, I can only live near people like me, sorry. And I'm talking mindset here, not identity. Perhaps I found it easier. Yeah, I definitely found it easier because I didn't have to adjust myself to my surroundings as much in some superficial ways. If I do have gaps in my life for people, surely I should make some gaps for unlike-minded people if we're going to create this world where things get better and people start getting on a little bit more and everybody calms down a little bit, before I need to be around people who don't think like me. I also don't think that amenities mean progress. That's another thing where I'm like, oh, look, these towns feel very stagnant because they don't have XYZ, they don't have this kind of theatre or this kind of cinema, or they don't have this many shows going on or this many pubs. Actually, that's not a problem for any UK town ever. Not enough pubs. I don't know if I'm worried about that yet. I don't have everything on my doorstep anymore. Like, the place that I live doesn't have all of the choices of things to do as easily or readily accessible as I did when I lived in London. However, I actually didn't have everything on my doorstep when I lived in London either. The famous rule of London is it takes an hour to get anywhere. And that is very true, sometimes more than an hour. So while I was like, I've got access to all these museums and these theatres, I was still travelling an hour to get to those things. And that mindset shift has actually been really valuable to take back to me to the Midlands, because now I've decided that I'm seeing anywhere that I can get to in an hour as somewhere that I live, because that's how I lived for the first 10 years of my adult life, and it worked quite well. I know that I would never be able to afford to live in the centre of London, so I was always living on the outskirts. Even if in a best case scenario I would still be on the outskirts of London, and therefore where I live now, since I can reach all these places within an hour, I don't only live in the place that I live, I also live in huge, massive, conglomerate city, Birmingham. I also live in Shakespeare's Stratford-upon-Avon. I also live in beautiful medieval Warwick. I also live in amazing Regency town Leamington Spa. I live near Kenilworth Castle. I live practically on the doorstep of the Cotswolds. These are all things that I can reach generally within an hour from where I live. So why don't I kind of mentally live there. I had that rule with friends as well, like feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to leave all my friends behind in London, which I didn't leave all my friends behind because they didn't all live in London, but I did leave some of them behind and I see them less regularly. However, if you've been a person in London, you'll realise that you don't see your friends every week anyway, and it usually took at least an hour to get to them. I never lived down the road from many of my friends at all, if ever. I think that happened like once. When 1 hour is your benchmark and you start looking at the other places you could potentially live, I think you might find, at least in the UK, that you are living somewhere where you have some of those amenities available to you, if not all. I also think an overabundance of amenities and like access to like culture and things that are happening can be a little overwhelming. I think I've been much more likely when I've been living here to turn up to things that aren't like exactly my taste, tailored to me. I already know I'm definitely going to like it, and I'm much more likely to go and see a local musician that I've only heard like one song from, or go to like a poetry reading by somebody I haven't heard of. And that has benefited my cultural capital, if anything, rather than diminished it. Also, if you're somebody who's like, oh, my kids have to grow up in a capital city because they have to be around culture, I just want you to like sit with that statement and think about maybe how classist that is and how weird that is and how most creatives haven't been born in capital cities. And some of them may never live in a capital city, and that doesn't mean that what they produce or what they think about is any less complex than somebody who has grown up in a capital city. That's wild. It's also interesting to note that I thought that because London was one of my favourite places ever, that it had to be the place that I lived. And that's a question. Should we live in our favourite places? Or should they be places that we visit, and if we live in them, do they stop becoming our favourite places? Is it really that impactful to live somewhere that you favour all the time? Or is it more impactful to live somewhere that meets all of your basic needs and makes sure that you're safe and that your health is looked at? I keep saying health because I genuinely am worried about the state of the NHS at the moment, and it's meaning that a lot of people in the UK are having to find money to make sure they get life-saving care. An example you might remember from during the pandemic, one of my best friends in the world had his dad be on a waiting list that would be so long for his life-saving surgery that he would almost definitely miss having that surgery and die, and we had to crowdfund some money to make sure that he got that operation so that he could live. It just feels so wild to say, but that's the bare bones of it. And I know in other countries, especially in the US, this might be a more familiar story to you, but for me, this is like a very new and scary time to be a person with a body. And I mean it when I say, like, I think that if you have a chance of leaving a capital city so that you can have some money in reserve for serious medical situations, I think that we are conditioned to think that we are so removed from disability or medical emergencies that it will never happen to us. And in my life and in lots of the lives of the friends that I know, I just don't see any evidence for that. And I think that this is why I'm making this video, because I feel very passionate about it right now, because I'm worried about everybody and I'm worried about the way the economy is, and I think we should all be taking it way more seriously than we are, me included. But one of the ways that I'm glad that I did take it seriously was leaving and staying away from London as a place of residence, because I think that, and I don't mean to sound dramatic here, but I genuinely think that my situation, I think it was putting my chances of shelter, my chances of like everything at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, my chances of real safety at risk. And I know that sounds traumatic, but that is genuinely what I am observing. So yes, what was I saying? Should we live in our favourite places? Not necessarily. I also really love Paris, but I'm never going to live there. That would be not the life bracket I've been born into, but that is okay. I don't walk around feeling bitter about that. I don't like sit out of the window wondering what it would be like if I lived in Paris. It's just somewhere that I try and visit sometimes because it's really nice. And there are lots of places around the world and in the UK that I love visiting, that I consider them one of my like little home from home places that I return to. I'm definitely like a repeat traveller when it comes to places. I really like returning to places as well as discovering new places. And there are lots of places, and London is one of them, that I feel like that. And when I do get to return to London, I get to live way better than I did when I actually lived there. I can afford to go to the shows. I can have a little treat meal out and not worry about if that's going to impact if I can afford to get the tube to work the next day. These are small and silly and privileged revelations that I wish I'd had sooner. that I can afford to love a city if I don't live in it. And if I live in it, I can't afford a lot of the time to actually enjoy it. I know that that is different for different people, and it depends on in what way you feel safe and in what way you feel protected. For me as a woman, I have never been catcalled or followed and harassed and sometimes sexually assaulted as much as I was when I lived in London, and things have frankly been very peaceful ever since then. That might not be the same for you, but it's worth questioning if there are other places within your country where you could feel a similar way as you do to London when it comes to safety, excitement, recognition, possibility. Even if it's just one rung down on the expense chain. Do you know what I mean? Even if you just go and live in a different city that's like not quite as expensive. And the final dichotomy is YOLO versus future-proofing. Living every day as if it's your last is really great if it genuinely is your last day, because none of the consequences will matter and everything you do only needs to make sense within the context of that day. All of the rest of the time, I would not advise living every day as if it's your last. You only live once, it's true, and therefore maybe we shouldn't be doing the things that we always feel like doing because we want to look after future us as well as present us. Sometimes looking after future you means staying in that job and sticking with it and seeing what happens. Sometimes it means leaving so that you have the safety of shelter. And I think this is something that if you grow up where shelter was a given is hard to think about. But I think that whether it's somewhere where rent is cheaper, so you're able to save up a few months worth of rent that you have in the back pocket in case something goes wrong, or if it means that leaving a capital city means that at some point you might have the chance of owning somewhere which is much safer to maintain your shelter. Like, remember, we're just trying to fulfill the bottom level of the triangle of needs right now. Do I think we should be here after all of the human progress? No. But I think there is a generation of people who have had that as a given, and their parents have had safety and shelter, so they don't consider that might be something that wouldn't be accessible to them in the future. And I think that we are about to hit a level where there are lots of people who have never experienced that before that will be experiencing it and will get a shock. And I would like as few of those people to be you, the people that are watching. I would like to reduce that number as much as possible by empowering you to ask yourself whether the information that you use to make the decision to move to this capital city are still true. And if they are not true, you need to remake that decision and make sure it still makes sense for you. I mean, stay if you can bag yourself an incredibly rich aristocrat. Good luck to you. I'm kidding. I'm mostly kidding. But another thing I think I had a revelation about when I was thinking about this was that I felt like I'd really built a life for myself in London. I didn't feel like I should have to leave. I didn't feel like it would be good for me to leave because I loved everybody that I lived in London with, and I think they're all brilliant. But I also came to realise that I had built a social life in London. I hadn't built a whole life, and some of those other aspects of life are outside of your control, and you might be able to put those aspects of your life back in your control if you are willing to reimagine the social life that you have built. Because unless you have built a social life with lots of wealthy aristocrats, that social network isn't going to be able to financially support you in the future if things get really bad, because all likelihood is you've made friends with people who are in a similar income bracket to you and aren't going to be able to like front £80,000 for a emergency medical procedure or front you 6 months worth of rent if you get ill. As the safety structures start being taken out of our society, we need to fight for them to stay, but on an individual level, we also need to act like that is happening and not pretend that it's not. The social aspect of things has been probably the part that I found the hardest. I've really missed not seeing my London friends as much as I did, but it has meant that I've seen some of my other friends a little bit more, and it's meant that I have probably been a better friend to everybody because I'm sleeping better, I'm less worried about money, I'm able to think more expansively about life, and then therefore probably a little bit more interesting to talk to. I'm more likely to post you trinkets and text you back and turn up with a jolly demeanour because I'm not as worried about all the stuff that I was worried about when I was trying to make a life work in London that wasn't ultimately going to be financially viable. And I think that just like if you met somebody from a different country and you fell in love with them and you decided to move across the world to be with them, all of your friends would hopefully be like, oh my god, that's so romantic, you should do that, I love that for you, go, follow your heart. I think they should be as excited for you if you leave to try and look after yourself, you know? It's not quite as romantic, but you are disappearing into the sunset with yourself. And that's quite nice, I think, in a world of not nice things happening. In summary, I think I need to get over, or am slowly getting over, slash I think I am finally clean, get over this idea of the Dick Whittington syndrome, the idea that you are going to go to a capital city to seek your fortune, because I can tell you that those fortunes are no longer in the capital cities like they might have been in the days of Dick Whittington. They are in offshore accounts and the Canary Islands. It can be where you go to find your fortune, but it can also be where you go to lose it, and it is as noble, as arty, as exciting, if not more, to try and build community and the kinds of shared spaces that you want in a place that you can afford to live. You are not boring if you don't live in a capital city. In fact, I'm way more excited to meet people who aren't from capital cities. I always felt like London was a symbol of like, if I get to London, then I'll have made it. And I really want to imagine what made it means. You haven't not made it if you leave, or if you never go in the first place. Making it is so 2010, making it out alive is so in, baby. Or maybe making it can more apply now to making it yourself. Like, make that exciting, vibrant place to live where you are. And that might not be perfect straight away, but you'll be making the next place. Like, make the place that you live or want to live a place where other people will dream about moving when they grow up and they're in their teenage bedrooms being like, I wonder one day I won't live here anymore and I'll live somewhere really exciting and beautiful. Maybe those future teenagers are imagining the place you currently live now, and you're one of the people that made it a place where people want to put their belongings in a handkerchief, on a stick, throw it over their shoulder and walk towards. Thank you for watching this video. It was made possible by the Gumption Club. They are my patrons. We have a Discord. It's a great place to hang out, and we talk all the time about these messy thoughts and try and untangle them for ourselves. If you have thoughts about capital cities, tell me about the capital city in your country. Tell me about, if you're from the UK, tell me about how you feel about London. If you never went, if you're still there and considering leaving, I'd love to hear all of the thoughts in the comments below. If you currently live in a capital city and there are circumstantial reasons why you can't leave, I hope you will appreciate me encouraging the people who can leave to leave, so we can lessen the crowding in the housing market for you and hopefully make the situation better for you too. Because the less people in line for the basic necessities all in one postcode, hopefully the more there is to go around. Thank you so much for listening. Frog Snug out.